with the same mindset. If I have to fall, I have to fall with a different mindset. You are listening to motivational speech before starting this speech. The speaker was saying, if I have to fall, I have to fall forward. I should not fall backward. So if you have to fall, we have to fall with a new mindset, because failure is the beginning of success. Failure is a place, and even where we develop a new mindset, new mentality to come to a new chapter. This is America. America, it says, actually, people who say, I can't, impossible, they multiply their problems. They multiply their problems. So we should not say, I can. Rather, I may try. I will try. I try. This leads us to bright future. When impossible is defeated, some people shy away from jumping over a gorge. Some other people have confidence to jump over a gorge. Those people who develop, they can get in from impossible, can possibly jump, can possibly move themselves to the next chapter of life. So this is, I say this in terms of female. In terms of men also the same. If we all jump in the same fashion, with a similar mindset, we cannot have the same mindset, we attain something which is of better quality. Thinking, not in the same way, but in a different way. If I think all the time in the same way, in a do one thing, that is insanity. Like what Albert Einstein said once. So we have to develop this kind of thinking in working with others, in developing new ideas, right? Fathom and the fathomless. Some of us fathom for whatever we have. Very few have fathomless thinking for what they do, for what they develop, for what they think. Rather, what can give us, what can move us with the new strategies, we have to think we have fathomless wisdom. Fathomless. We should not give a limit to the way we think, rather we have to say limitless. So if we have this, we serve ourselves, we serve others. And we extract the resource, the hidden resource, from our being. And sometimes, not sometimes, many people see the world vaguely. They say, this world is vague. It's not clear. It doesn't have good things for us. So this is the way we see the world. If we see the world in a vague way, what we receive, what we harvest will also be vague one. And some people have killer fun, some people have healer vein. Some people. And the pessimist people have killer fun. In their fun, delivery fun, they have all the killing elements. These are pessimist people, and those people who are optimists have healer vein. Healer. In the vein they have, in the vein they possess, they believe they have something that heals. Relationship that roots and sustains. If the relationship is deeper and deeper, if we consider as a tree, if that relationship is considered as a tree, if that tree pushes, moves its roots down, it will be strong. So these are important items. This is American. Let me read it. Yemayas means partnership. The crux of the matter of partnership, it means. In the Bahai in the demand, what is the shaka, the nashaka, are we together? Are we moving together? Something isn't. What have we done? What is at our hand? What do we have for the future? Separate what are we spanning our boundary? Are we spanning our boundary? So you say last statement, highlighting the big picture. Establishing our being or our country or globe, we can live together, we can grow together, we can share what we have to meet. The past, the current, and the future, if our current level of thinking does not exceed our past level of thinking, we hardly jump into the future without an achievement. So our thinking level, our today's thinking level should be different from our thinking of tomorrow. And our today's thinking level should be different from our thinking of yesterday. All the time we have to grow. We have to develop new elements, it means. So, briefly, transformation means thinking plus doing plus harvesting. Thinking plus doing plus harvesting. This is necessitated by what we call transformation. Weakening relationship. The word of blaming, the word of shifting blame is weakening relationship. In a relationship, there is interaction. If that interaction is reactive type, it is a weakening relationship. Relationship, what's in the relationship is there, but it is not sustaining, it is not empowering, it's not productive. It is simply there for the sake of looking at it. So we should move ourselves from weakening relationship to empowering relationship, it means. Knowing our being, our potential is not what others want us to be. We are not artificial beings. We are ourselves. As we are ourselves, our being depends on ourselves. So we have to act according to our thinking. Of course, I'm not saying we should not take from others. We should not learn from others. But what is important is enough. What kills us enough? What kills us enough? It means how to become aware of one's own potential is an exercise for everybody. Turning pages. We are a book. How many pages do we have? How many of them are turned? How frequently do we turn our pages? How frequently do we read our pages? How frequently do we move ourselves forward? So assume we are a big book with numberless pages. A book with numberless pages. So we have to turn these pages to unleash our potential, to establish relationships, to come up with effective results. Coming to the end, we are what we are because of others. We all are what we are because of others. I have something for you, you have something for me. From what you give me, I recreate something, I create something. It means. So, in one way or another, we depend on others and on ourselves. So we are what we are because of others gives attention to the relationship we have to establish. Seamless, as I've already said at the beginning, seamless is very important. I have to be seamless. So seamless has these three basic elements: togetherness, operation, conversation. So without being seamless, we cannot openly explain ourselves, share our ideas with others, and convince others, at the same time be convinced by others. So this is very important. Solitary journey needs to fail. So we have to work together, we have to come together, we have to create a new synergy. From what we have already had, we have to look for a new reality. So finally, our agenda is this: individual plus organization plus local plus continental plus global. This gives us effective partnership. Really, I thank you very much. Sorry for taking your time. That's all.
Your Excellency, Mr. Bantam Bellew, President of KOICA Ethiopia Club, distinguished professors, and my dear KOICA Club members. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this research seminar jointly organized by KOICA and Ethiopian Civil Service University, which plays a great role in capacity building for public servants. As the government bilateral organization to carry out development cooperation program, including capacity building program in Korea and also in Ethiopia, KOICA has provided short and long-term capacity building to nearly 1,600 Ethiopian government officials from various sectors. Also, KOICA last year provided a comprehensive response program to tackle down COVID-19 pandemic last year. In this regard, KOICA is very honored to sponsor today's knowledge sharing seminar on the area of COVID-19 impact assessment. I hope this seminar will allow all the participants to understand the impact of pandemic since its outbreak in Ethiopia last year. This seminar will also provide a very close guideline for the government to find out effective response plan to COVID-19 pandemic. Dear participants, academicians' role in socio-economic development are very vital, but in order to improve their skills and knowledge utilized by the government policy and decision makers, knowledge sharing, discussion, seminars, and conferences are very integral to be prepared for a practical contribution in building their country's economy. Therefore, it is great honor for KOICA to prepare such a supportive research seminar so that the participants' presentation and discussion will be able to provide an impact assessment of the COVID-19 pandemic with your response plan and recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, today's seminar will discuss the pandemic's impact from various kinds of perspectives. Thus, the respective panels from the university and the KOICA Club will be presenting on the following 5 disciplines for effective discussion by the participants. First, sexual and gender-based violence amid COVID-19 in Ethiopia. Implication for women's girls' rights. So second, tracing, tracking, and management of COVID-19 cases in Addis Ababa using GIS. Third, the role of local government in containing COVID-19 in Ethiopia. Evidence from Oromia Regional State and Addis Ababa City Administration. Fourth, the contemporary challenges of COVID-19 pandemic on the major sectors in Ethiopia. 5. Impact of COVID-19 on fintech. Empirical evidence on adoption of digital financial service in Ethiopia. Dear participants, I believe every one of you is an expert in your sector, so your active participation in the discussion will support this seminar to draw an effective result. Therefore, please use this seminar to reflect your knowledge and concerns. Finally, once again, I would like to say my appreciation to Ethiopian Civil Service University for hosting this ideal seminar, and thank all presenters, moderators, coordinators, and participants for attending the seminar today. Thank you so much.
This seminar and paper presenters, I'd like to welcome you to this seminar. And now we will proceed with presentation of research papers, whereby we can exchange several thoughts, experiences, and also draw lessons about the situation of the pandemic, COVID-19. Three of the papers to be presented and presented by three researchers and moderated by myself are here. Now, the first of the three papers is going to be presented by Mr. Daniel Tasema. Mr. Daniel Tasema has got his bachelor's degree in philosophy from Addis Ababa University, and he also done his master's degree in development studies with emphasis on human rights, gender and conflict studies from University of Rotterdam, the Netherlands. He has been working for KOICA University. Now he is stationed at Adama Science and Technology University. He is a lecturer and acting office manager and assistant of the president. So the floor is now to Mr. Daniel Tasema. He has 20 minutes. I would be strict on time. Hope he will also finish his presentation within the frame of the given time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Almaria, for your modest introduction. I would like to thank both KOICA and Ethiopian Civil Service University for jointly organizing this research seminar and inviting me to share what I have. All right, let me begin. This is the title of my today's presentation, Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Amid COVID-19 in Ethiopia. And I'll talk about the implications that this virus has on the rights of women and girls. I'll try to end up my presentation before 20 minutes. This is a picture. Coming to the outline, I'll have an introduction and I'll define certain concepts regarding what is meant by gender-based violence, what is meant by violence against women and girls, and I'll talk about a statement of the problem and objective in a few slides, methodology. I'll talk about the findings regarding this topic, conclusion, and finally I'll offer certain recommendations. So to begin with the introduction or background, the outbreak, as you all know, the outbreak of a global pandemic called COVID-19 has become a big threat for countries across borders to achieve the sustainable development goals, particularly the so-called 17 sustainable development goals. We know that the disease has taken many lives in millions. More than 3 million people have died because of this virus, and it has taken resources globally. It has paralyzed the economy. It has created to some extent political instability in certain places in the globe. Women and girls have the right to lead violence-free lives. However, violence against women and girls has been a serious human rights violation across borders. To support this claim, I will pick a study conducted by the World Bank, and according to this report of World Bank, 1 in 3 women and girls globally are adversely affected by gender-based violence. Besides, UNDP also states that 243 million women and girls between the ages of 15 and 49 in the world are exposed to both physical and sexual violence. We know that COVID-19 has become a big threat for countries, as I said earlier, in the world. And the outbreak and spread of this disease increases the household plus caregiving responsibilities of women and girls, and has serious implications for their vulnerability for abuse, both at home and outside. Gender-based violence is increasing due to social isolation and limited movement restrictions taken by some countries across borders. Initially, almost every country in the world has taken movement restrictions and social isolation measures, at least to contain the spread of the pandemic. Sexual and gender-based violence, in fact, demoralizes dignity and health of women and girls. It has both economic plus social costs. The grave health consequences such as abortion or unwanted pregnancy that victims of gender-based violence encounter are immense. We cannot calculate this magnitude somehow. SGBV, meaning sexual and gender-based violence, increases not only during conflict or economic crisis, but also during the outbreak of diseases. This is a claim coming from scholars in the area. And SGBV has been a critical problem in our country, Ethiopia. That's why addressing human rights violations that Ethiopian women plus girls encounter due to sexual and gender-based violence promotes moral excellence, the respect for human rights, and achieving social justice. Coming to that of the definition of certain concepts regarding my today's speech, sexual violence refers to any act, attempt, or a threat of a sexual nature that result or is likely to result in physical, psychological, plus emotional harm. It's a form of gender-based violence and includes sexual exploitation plus sexual abuse. The very term GBV refers to violence which targets individuals or groups based on, say, gender. The UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination or all forms of discrimination against women, so-called the CEDAW, defines gender-based violence as follows: violence which is directed against a woman because she is a woman or affects women disproportionately. The UN also defines violence against women as any act of gender-based violence which results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual plus mental harm or suffering to women, including threats of such act as coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. In fact, violence against women encompasses sexual abuse of female children in the household, dowry-related violence, we have marital rape, female genital mutilation, FGM in short, and other traditional practices which are harmful to women, non-spousal violence, and violence related to exploitation. Well, in fact, there are around 5 types of sexual and gender-based violence. First and foremost, we have sexual violence, which includes rape and marital status, child sexual abuse, only to mention a few for the sake of time. The second one is the so-called physical violence, which includes physical assault or trafficking. The third one is emotional plus psychological violence. It includes humiliation or confinement. The fourth one is harmful traditional practices. We have in this category FGM, early marriage, and the like. And finally, we have socio-economic violence, which includes discrimination and or denial of opportunities or a social exclusion. Coming to that of a statement of the problem, according to the UNDP's 2020 brief, domestic violence cases, let me give you a background, a global background. Cases have shown a 30% rise or increase in France since France has declared a national lockdown on the 17th of March 2020. This brief also underlined that lockdown measures taken by such countries as Singapore, we can take Cyprus, we can take Argentina, have resulted in helpline call increase to report domestic violence cases. Those outbreak of diseases threatens everyone's health or life. It disproportionately affects women and girls. This is a report coming from the UN. According to a research conducted by Onyango and his colleagues, by the year 2019, this study depicted that the outbreak of Ebola virus in West Africa between the years 2013 to 2015 has resulted in an increase in sexual violence. So researchers fundamentally show that gender-based violence is commonly practiced in Africa, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa or sub-Saharan African countries. And it is mainly reported that the prevalence of sexual and GBV in sub-Saharan African countries is very high in such countries as we can take Zambia, which is around 90%, and Ethiopia, which is around 71%. It's a mistake, not 711%. 71%. The very objective of this research, women and girls, as far as they are humans, in fact, because of this male-dominated world, there are certain groups which consider humans as, women and girls as subhumans, and they fail to give all the necessary respect. And addressing human rights, that is patriarchy. Addressing human rights violations that women and girls encounter basically promotes moral excellence, respect for human rights, and achieving social justice. I have conducted a desk-based research. In fact, my aim is to collect empirical data from the field. For this research seminar, I am unable to come up with the results of my empirical evidences found from the fields. So this desk-based research has an objective of giving a general overview on how this pandemic exacerbates the existing sexual and gender-based violence on women and girls in Ethiopia, and make this floor open for further discussion by participants of the seminar. It's my belief that this paper will contribute to furthering social justice in a way which allows women or girls to be free from any kind of oppression and violence, by giving those spaces for women and girls to be influencers whose voice can be heard on different stages. Thank you. Methodology, as I said a moment ago, this is purely a desk-based research. I haven't collected empirical data, since many researches, by the way, haven't been conducted, and those ongoing ones haven't been completed based on my reading and research, and those ongoing ones haven't been completed and published on the topic in Ethiopia. The researcher has reviewed certain existing literatures. I haven't in fact counted all the literatures I have reviewed. You can see at the end of this PPT. The reason why I use the desk-based research is because it gives me quick data on previous researches conducted. Besides, it doesn't cost a lot. It's a purely qualitative method research. Coming to that of my findings from those literatures which I have tried to investigate, I divide my findings regarding sexual and gender, the magnitude of sexual and gender-based violence prior to the outbreak and spread of COVID-19, and during and after the outbreak of COVID-19 in our country. There are certain institutions that have tried their level-based to release reports concerning an increase in sexual and gender-based violence around the globe, although it is very early to get a very comprehensive data in this realm. For example, according to the policy report, the policy brief of the UN, which was released on April 9, 2020, there are countries which reported that violence against women and girls has even doubled. According to the UN Women's Policy Brief of the year 2020, COVID-19 has deepened not only the economic but also social stress for families where women are or girls are the main breadwinners. This resulted in an increase in sexual plus gendered violence, otherwise called GBV. The policy brief highlighted that the lockdown measures taken by countries exacerbated violence, and the disruption of support to GBV survivors added also to their wounds. We know that Ethiopia is a country where more than half of our populations are women and girls. It is known that FGM, rape, early marriage, women trafficking or abduction are the most common forms of sexual and gender-based violence in our country. SGBV has been a critical problem in Ethiopia. Let me show you certain evidences from studies conducted by WHO and Ethiopian Demographic Health Authority. The main finding of a multi-country study on women's health and domestic violence against women, which was conducted by WHO by the year 2005, has shown that in Ethiopia, nearly one half, meaning 49% of ever partnered women experienced physical violence by a partner at some point in their lives, and 29% during the past 12 months when this research was conducted. Moreover, 59% of ever partnered women experienced sexual violence at some point, and 44% during the past 2 months. This is a recent finding from WHO. Besides, according to the Ethiopia Demography and Health Survey of the year 2016, 10% of women whose age ranged between 15 and that of 49 reported that they have experienced sexual violence at some point in their lives, and 7% reported that they had experienced sexual violence in the past 12 months. 5% of women had experienced sexual violence by age 18, including 2% who had experienced sexual violence by age 15. Plus, a study conducted by EUCLA found that girls who got married below the age of 15 experienced intimate partner violence, the so-called IPV, and unwanted marital intercourse. As this researcher stated in his finding, the youngest brides, I quote, the youngest brides had experienced high levels of first sex with their husbands. It accounts around 32%, and were more likely than older brides to have recently experienced IPV at the hands of their husbands. Let's now look at the magnitude of sexual and gender-based violence in Ethiopia during and after the outbreak of this global pandemic. The Ethiopian government declared a state of emergency on April 8, 2020 for around 5 months to contain the pandemic's spread throughout the nation. And a public gathering, as you all know, the public gatherings and meetings were prohibited. The measures taken, in fact, by the government to contain the spread of the disease have forced women and girls to stay at home with their abusers. And this, in turn, has brought about an increase in different forms of violence, such as rape, harassment, assault, and IPV. This is a finding from the UN Women. The same policy brief also mentions that girls who were out of school for some time due to COVID-19 were forced to marry men of their family picks or choices in some regions of the nation. Since violence or abuse cases in Ethiopia are underreported, it's difficult to get accurate figures regarding the magnitude of the problem or violence. However, some info released by media show the alarming picture of an increase in sexual and gender-based violence. For instance, a press release of May 7, year 2020 from the State Minister of Women, Children and Youth reveals that women and girls are being exposed to rights violations in the context of the pandemic. On May 10, 2020, on his official Facebook page, His Excellency Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed made a statement that the Ethiopian government doesn't tolerate any form of violence against women and girls during this pandemic. Based on a report by the Ministry of Women, Children and Youth, between March 10 and that of May 29, 2020, around 280 gender-based violence cases were reported. According to a roundtable,
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Thank you. According to a roundtable discussion premiered on June 2, 2020 by Walter TV, I guess some of you might have watched this program. Sadly and shockingly, 100 plus women, girls plus boys have been raped in Ethiopia within the last 2 months after the outbreak and spread of this pandemic. And these rape cases are reported by 3 hospitals, and disturbingly, some of them are raped by their fathers. And some of these fathers force their girls to use drugs before having sexual intercourse. According to Almaz Abraham, who is the head of Addis Ababa City Administration Women and Children Office, some of these raped girls have become pregnant and they are suffering from psychological trauma or crisis. And following a visit to a shelter built for SGBV survivors, Her Excellency President Sahle-Work Zewde denounced the unusual feature of incidents of violence against women and girls, whereby family members and close relatives are among the perpetrators. Moreover, a revival of harmful traditional practice amidst the pandemic was also stated by the Amhara Regional State Bureau of Women and Children's Affairs. The Bureau announced around 585 reported cases of early marriage and over 1,000 intersected marriages in the region. North Wallo, South Wallo, East Gojam plus South Gondar zones are identified as the main hotspots. The assumption is that COVID-19 is exacerbating the already existing violence in Ethiopia. In addition, a Lenta hotline operated by Seitawit has been offering counseling service to violence survivors since 2019. However, to ensure the counselor security, this hotline was suspended on April 2020, but it was reopened. Regarding economy, COVID-19 has forced women and girls to earn less, to save less. It has also forced them to engage in informal sectors where they get less secure jobs. In terms of health, this pandemic has negatively impacted women and girls in a way that they are obligated to have less access to sexual plus reproductive health care services. Okay. I'm coming to the end, 2 minutes. As the UNDP's report of the year 1994 states, human security includes safety from such chronic threats as hunger, disease, and repression, and protection from sudden and hurtful disruptions in the patterns of daily lives, whether in homes, jobs, or communities. The well-known economist, Nobel Prize winner in economics, Amartya Sen, explains how the notions of human security, human development, and human rights are interrelated. Sen defines freedom as real opportunities that we have to accomplish what we value. He explains the fundamental aspects of freedom. These are opportunity and process. The former focus on the ability of a person to achieve those things that she has reason to value. Martha Nussbaum also states that human capabilities exert a moral claim that they should be developed. Human beings are creatures such that, provided with the right educational and material support, they can become fully capable of major human functions. The reason why I am mentioning Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum, well-known scholars in the area of human freedom and human rights, is that due to the outbreak of COVID-19, exacerbated sexual and gender-based violence, there are women and girls in Ethiopia who have lost their self-reliance, who have lost their autonomy, who have lost their self-direction and empowerment. Their human rights have been seriously violated. Coming to that conclusion, it's an undeniable fact that women and girls experience violence both at home and outside. Violence against women and girls is not only seen as a violation of human rights, but also a health problem globally. Let me take the quote from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres regarding this issue. Quote, "Gender equality and women's rights are essential to getting through this pandemic together, to recovering faster and to building a better future for everyone." If my time is up, I can skip the recommendations. For 1 minute? Okay. Okay, so here I have listed certain recommendations. Since women and girls encounter different forms of violence or exploitation, government and other partnering organizations are expected to take the needs of women and girls as a top priority issue. Strengthening the provision of services of women and girls, ensuring their participation in leadership, allowing them to engage in COVID-19 response strategies, making data on SGBV available for policymakers are some of the measures that can be effectively implemented to tackle the problem. I think my time is up. Thank you for your attention. No means no.
Yep. I'd like to thank Mr. Daniel for being time conscious. He has brought the issue of gender-based violence, which concerns every one of us. During this time of the pandemic, women particularly, and human beings in general, have been looking for emotional support, economic support, social support, psychological support. And yet, we have been treating the important half of our global community as harsh as perpetrating gender-based violence. So this desk review, library research, has brought to us some of the facts about gender-based violence, an increase of gender-based violence during the pandemic, and also costs of gender-based violence, particularly sexual violence, as traumatic as it remains throughout the lives of the victims, and also the conceptual framework and conceptual clarity regarding what gender-based violence means, and other related indicators and indications of this violence by Mr. Daniel. Of course, this is just to refresh your memory about what has been presented so far, and the discussion will follow after the remaining 2 papers being presented for us. Now, I'd like to thank Mr. Daniel and call upon Mr. Solomon Tesfaye to present his paper titled Tracing, Tracking and Management of COVID-19 Cases in Addis Ababa Using GIS. Professional background of the presenter, Mr. Solomon Tesfaye has earned his bachelor's degree in Geography and Environmental Studies, and he also has done his master's degree in Population Studies. He has served the Ministry of Defense as a GIS expert for about 5 years, and he is one of the senior faculty members of Ethiopian Civil Service University for the last 11 years. He is a member of the College of Urban Development and Engineering. This is it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Alamay. And I would like to thank Ethiopian Civil Service University and KOICA for giving this chance to present my research result. And the research was entitled Tracing, Tracking and Management of COVID-19 Cases in Addis Ababa Using GIS. Having said this, the table of content includes background, objective, significance of the study, methodology, finding, conclusion, and recommendation. As a background, as you all are aware, on January 30, 2020, World Health Organization declared the current novel coronavirus disease as epidemic, a public health emergency of international concern, which has both social and economic impact. And the first epidemic registered in China, Wuhan city, and almost it's been distributed to almost all countries of the world nowadays. And in the case of Ethiopia, as of June 2021, Ethiopia reported a total of almost 274,000 confirmed cases, and the cumulative number of recoveries has reached 250,000, while the number of deaths has increased to 4,267. In the case of Addis Ababa, cases have been increasing, increased exponentially, with Addis Ababa counting a total of almost 132,000 cases. Having said this, but not yet the potential of GIS had been explored in Addis Ababa especially. So the objective of the study are the following. The main objective of the study is to track, trace, and manage COVID-19 cases in Addis Ababa using GIS, and the specific objectives are 3. One is to assess the practice of GIS-based monitoring and management of COVID-19 in Addis Ababa. The second one is to demonstrate how GIS technology can be optimized for tracking, tracing, and monitoring of COVID-19 in Addis Ababa. The third one is to generate time-enabled maps, which can help reveal how infection spread over time, and it can help decision makers where to target or to make intervention. Okay, the significance of the study, especially it can help decision makers to easily understand the situation and take decision quickly. And it can assist in priority setting, program planning resource distribution, and can help authorities in planning process, enable use of resource in an efficient and sustainable manner. Methodology of this research, the research design, the study employed descriptive and explanatory research design, and it's more of quantitative with qualitative aspect. And I use two types of data. One is spatial data and the other one is non-spatial data. Spatial data are land-related data with location, and non-spatial data that describe the spatial data, which are more of statistical data. So it's been designed with the help of the so-called as a software that I use, ArcGIS, and both the spatial and non-spatial data are combined. Then I perform the GIS analysis, and the products are tabular data, summary data, statistical report, and the other one are maps, different type of maps which can help data visualization, monitoring, and management of COVID-19. Data source, I was able to collect using handheld GPS, 34. In Addis Ababa has been officially announced by the Ministry of Health. There are 34 sample collecting sites, hospitals, it could be health centers, etc. And I collect the spatial location of those health centers using Garmin GPS, and boundaries of the subdivisions, roads, the spatial data, and other related data. The sources are from Ethiopia SE, and there are also many sources in the website from OCHA. The other one, in addition, beyond these technical issues, in order to answer the first objective, simple random sampling was used in the selection of the study units. And the sample consists of 90 respondents, out of which there are 70 health officers, medical doctors, etc. And the remaining 20 interview also being done through interview. The data was collected, both the questionnaire and the interview. Data analysis and presentation, qualitative data were analyzed through summarizing and describing information in a meaningful way, and quantitative data were entered and analyzed by using Excel spaces in the ArcGIS. The result of the data analysis were presented as map, table, and graphs. In addition to this, I just conduct two things. One is I try to run the so-called average nearest neighborhood analysis, which is very important to identify the concentration of medical or health centers. Is there any concentration, or are they distributed throughout the city? The other one is further road network analysis was also carried out to find two things. One is the best route, and the other one is to find closest facility in an efficient way using GIS. Okay, let's go to the data presentation and discussion. With regard to the first objective, whether there is a practice of GIS-based monitoring and management in Addis Ababa, it was found that 83.6% of the respondents replied that GIS is not used for COVID-19, and while 16.4% replied yes on the organization practice of GIS for COVID-19. But through interview, what I found was that simply those who say yes, they are using GIS is simply for tracking the ambulance where it's been rounding throughout the city. That's the only thing they use. That's why they say yes. The other one, what I found was that almost all health centers, including hospitals, Ethiopian Public Health Institute, use the so-called DHIS, District Health Information Software. Previously it was DHIS 1, this time it becomes DHIS 2. So almost 100% they use this software. Okay, with regard to application of GIS for tracking, monitoring and management of COVID-19, you know, GIS can help us in data-based management. It can store, it has the ability to store, we can edit, update easily. Funny thing here, while I just collecting data, I go to the Ethiopian Public Health Institute and I pass through you know, after a week there is a process, security issue, etc., etc. Then at the end of the day, they told me that they gave me a password so that I can access the data online. If the password works for 2 days, so when I get the data from them, all of the data are in Excel data. Excel. And what I found was that almost the data I couldn't understand is very sophisticated and it's not easy to understand. And really, I didn't use that data. I just get an option and I collect data from Addis Ababa Health Bureau. But with such case, GIS can help us. Okay, it has the ability to store and manage data easily. The other one is data analysis and mapping. Map play a key role, okay, in communicating the risk and the spread of COVID-19 to keep track of the growing coronavirus situation, because they make things easy. You can easily understand some of them and where to target intervention, where to allocate resources easily. They are very important. The other thing, as I have already told you, I just collect the sample collection, the X and Y coordinate of the health centers and the apps. As you can see, the distribution seems like this. Here, in the picture, this is the distribution of health centers which are found. And I ran the so-called average nearest neighborhood. And according to this analysis, it was found was that the result was 1.02. That means the COVID-19 sample collection site in Addis Ababa are not concentrated within the subsidy. Okay, there is a kind of somehow fair distribution within the subsidy. The other one is GIS can help us in this is very important in identifying the spatial disparity of disease using DIs. Here, I just make the so-called dot map of the spatial disparity of COVID. I took a 1 month's data and I ran it, and through kernel, the so-called kernel density estimation, which is used using ArcGIS to identify cluster based on the spatial disparity of the COVID-19 confirmed case. Though this is based on 1 month's result. When I ran it, it seems like this in the result, as you can see in the picture. Then this can help you to make, you know, this one indicate you very clearly the hot spot area. You can easily, let's say for instance, this one is Eka, this one is Boli, the other hot around here, Arada. It seems like that. This is a 1 month's data. Then based on this result, you know, the next step is to make buffer zone around area with cluster of coronavirus cases. As you can see, the next I can make buffer. This could be, let's say for example, 500 meter buffer, 300 meter, 200, etc. So with the help of satellite image, if this is the hotspot area that I took, let's say for example, this is the red one, which is this one in Kirkos. So with the help of satellite image, you can buffer the area. Clearly, you can make no movement around here. It could be for a week or 2 weeks. So this one can help you to track and identify the hotspot area so that you can make easily measures. The other one is two things. One is shortest route using network analysis. Shortest route analysis generates the best route between two locations based on distance. I use based on distance, but there is a possibility time can also be used. Okay? Therefore, let's say for example, this is Gandhi Hospital. Okay? Gandhi. So, if I would like to move to let's say here Bulbula Health Center, from this I could run this method, then the result can easily show me how to move from Gandhi Hospital to Bulbula Health Center, okay, through the given road network. That means the shortest distance. From Bulbula Health Center, the same thing to Turunesh, which is the best route. It can show you easily if you run if you use this method. The second one related to this is closest facility analysis using ArcGIS. Okay, let's say for example, an incident could happen here.
5
An
minutes.
incident.
5 minutes.
Okay. An incident could happen here. Okay, it could be serious situation of COVID-19. So from here, simply sitting on the office, you could run this using this software. Then it shows you the nearest. It could be hospital or health center. The nearest from the incidents, okay? The nearest health center. So that you can easily move. This could help especially for ambulance, and it can save lives, which revealed the closest facility and based on distance, to reach the closest facility and the number of facility to find and the direction of travel from incident to the facility or from the facility to an incident. The other one is there is a possibility also we can produce time-enabled maps. Okay, different type of maps. Let's say for example this one is August, September, October and November, and you can see easily how the situation is going on. Is it increasing, decreasing? So they say for example this time Addis Ababa Health Bureau are producing only through tele. But if they support with such kind of maps, it could be interesting. And there is a possibility also, maps can make things easy to understand, so that you can make intervention where to intervene, okay? Where resources should be allocated in August and in September, okay? So maps can easily show rather than tables. So we can also use, this one is monthly, and also daily status of coronavirus cases can be also produced. You can produce like, for example, March 10, 11, it goes like that, and you can see easily the changing situation. So you can monitor daily case distribution over time and location, and health officials, can see pattern to predict the future spread of the disease. Having said this, in this perspective, in the fight of COVID-19 and other possible pandemic, GIS play an essential role and improve the overall capability, tracking, tracing, and monitoring and management of coronavirus to enhance public safety. Recommendation 1: the Addis Ababa Health Bureau should establish, mapping departments with necessary infrastructure and resources. The other one is Addis Ababa Health Bureau should continue its credible practice of publishing the coronavirus case table-based daily report, but also should utilize GIS, to produce dynamic maps for quicker and easier understanding and decision making. The other one is the Bureau should also specify subsidy-based report at water level. The other one, the Bureau also should specify subsidy-based daily reports in water level and build, develop, and maintain a comprehensive collection of subsidy level spatial data, including detailed administrative boundary, transportation, network, disaster-prone areas, pharmacies, health centers, healthcare facilities, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Mr. Solomon. I cordially call upon Mr. Nguse to take his seat. Mr. Nguse has done his bachelor's degree in educational administration and two master's degrees, one in public management and public policy, and the second one is regional and local development studies. About three of his degrees are from Addis Ababa University, and now he is pursuing his terminal degree at the Addis Ababa University, very loyal to the institution, and he has been proceeding from one stage to the other in the same institution. So he's, I think, regarded to be one of the loyal alumni to Addis Ababa University. His topic is the role of local governments in Addis Ababa administration and Oromia regional state in containing COVID-19. So the floor is yours, Mr. Nguse. You can proceed. You have 20 minutes. Be time conscious. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Alamayo. I would also like to thank the KOICA and ECSU for inviting me to present this paper. As you see, the title is The Role of Local Governments in Containing COVID-19 in Ethiopia, focusing on Oromia regional states and Addis Ababa city administration. Obviously, the coronavirus disease is creating enormous stress on the healthcare system of almost all nations in the world. It is causing social, political, economic impacts. The Ethiopian government, like closing schools, limiting gatherings, and other measures, other policy measures, hand washing and using sanitizers, using face masks were communicated repeatedly, but the impact, the virus was spreading fast, and now the total cases are reaching almost 300,000, out of which more than 4,000 are death cases in Ethiopia. So this shows that the problem is a very serious problem. Actually, the problem is mostly seen from the public health perspective most of the time. In addition to that, it also causes social problem, social impact, psychological impact, as well as economic impact. In addition to that, it also has political dimension and democratic. It will affect even the democratic issues, democratic principles, such as participation is affected as a result of restrictions. Transparency will also be affected. Accountability issues can be affected as a result of this. So it affects every aspect of human life. So because of this, better governance is important to control this kind of problem, because this infectious disease control presents significant governance challenge as well. And governance also need to set up a functional system to face this challenge, such as timely intervention, having political commitments, mobilization. All these things are expected from the government to prevent the problem. When you talk about governance, local governments are very important. Local governments have a great role, because without these local governments, we cannot talk about the governance system as a whole, and especially in controlling this pandemic as well. Because local governments can also establish healthy and safe work environment, they create jobs, they create sustainable local economic development and a stable political climate as well. Because decentralization itself has many justifications, out of which democratic justification and developmental justification are mentioned. When we talk about development, we are talking about education, about health, about soil waste management and other issues which are mostly performed by local governments. So health issue is also one of the developmental aspect. When we talk about COVID-19, so it is a health aspect and it is highly linked to the local government activities. Local governments in the federal system also do not have similar place. In some countries, local governments are recognized by federal constitutions. For example, in Spain, in Brazil, Nigeria, India, Switzerland, South Africa, they recognize the local governments on their federal constitutions, but many other constitutions of the world are silent on the local government issues, or they give such power for regional or provincial governments. According to a local government specialist, a South African local government specialist, Professor Nico Stetler, when the three levels of government have their own power, each of them are autonomous, that will create the relationships becomes complex. So this needs management, appropriate management or leadership, or because of the power sharing, there may be a conflict between these levels of governments, and this needs institutions to be built, and culture of democracy, culture of negotiation to be developed to manage such kind of issues. Otherwise, because the local governments demand power, they may demand more power, and the central government also feels that the power is taken from it by the local governments, and this may create some kind of conflict, and that needs appropriate management. So we can see that the importance of local government is increasing from time to time, and it is also impacting our mode of governance, or the philosophy of governance is also affected by the development of the importance of these local governments. So we need to know the powers of local governments in relation with this managing pandemics, including the COVID-19. So this is because this study also examines the role of local governments in containing this pandemic. The objective is just to examine the responsibility of each level of government for containing the virus under the country's federal dispensation, to assess the extent to which local governments are recognized under the federal constitution, and to explore how much power and competencies are given to them, to assess the activities of each level of government in containing the virus in relation to constitution and federal system, and finally to recommend future policy direction to build strong local governance in Ethiopia. The significance is that it provides information about local government's role in containing the pandemic, so it will assist federal, regional, and local policymakers, planners, program implementers to acquaint with current knowledge about the status of local government to avoid rebirth of COVID-19 infections and of similar pandemics in the future. The methodology is descriptive and explanatory. I try to describe and explore the issues. It's purely qualitative research. and primary data and secondary data are also used. I largely relied on secondary documents like constitutions, proclamations, regulations, and different unpublished documents and reports. But I also tried to complement this by a few interviews from the selected local governments in both administrations. So the finding of the study shows that the Constitution assures that the federal government and the state shall have legislative, executive, and judicial powers. Their powers of policy making are constitutionally delineated, and that they shall respect their powers. And the federal government formulates over all social and economic policies and developmental policies. According to Article 52, the Constitution also empowers the regional states to formulate and execute their economic and social development policies, strategies, and plans of their respective governments. Article 50, Sub-Article 4 empowers the regional governments to grant power for local governments. And we can see that local governments in Ethiopia are not protected by the federal constitution, like the constitutions we earlier discussed in Brazil, in India, in Nigeria, as they put specified the roles and functions of local governments clearly on the federal constitution. Our constitution gives the power for regional governments to establish local governments. So this we can say that they do not have, they are not protected, they do not have adequate protection under the constitution, because their competences are not granted by the federal constitution and their power is not original. And the place of local government is somewhat ambiguous and it's not clear. The regional constitutions also do not explain whether the waradas may formulate and adopt policies on the local development matters. Example, the 2001 Constitution of Oromia does not clearly state whether waradas can formulate their own policies on local development issues. Similarly, many constitutions, not only Oromia but other constitutions of the regional states in Ethiopia, are more or less similar. They do not clearly, they do not say about the policy-making power of the waradas or the local governments. However, the Tigray Constitution, the Tigray Regional State Constitution is better, or it is a bit advanced in indicating or in clearly specifying the roles, the policy-making powers of local governments, waradas. It is better when we compare with other constitutions. It even granted the power of levying and collecting taxes from specified sources. So others do not say much about local government, except they say that local governments can plan and on their social and economic issues. Addis Ababa City Administration Proclamation number 35 also states that the city shall have waradas that are organs of sub-city. So warada administrations may, it also says that warada administrations may decrease or increase when necessary, because it is not in the constitution that it is given for the city administration to establish the waradas. The waradas may, the city may increase or decrease whenever it thinks that it is necessary. This shows that warada states body hierarchically subsidiary to the city government, and the waradas in Addis Ababa are accountable to the people as well as to the sub-city council. It says also the sub-city itself is accountable to the people as well as accountable to the city government. So from these things we can learn that the status of local government is based on the interest of powerful party at the federal and the regional levels rather than constitutional principles. So when some party comes, it may increase or decrease the number of waradas or the number of, it may upgrade cities or it may take some measures because it is already given for such issues. So the federal government's power to regulate widespread disease is stated in the Constitution as the government shall establish and implement the national standards and basic policy criteria for public health, education, science and technology, as well as for the protection and preservation of cultural and historical legacies. So we can see that the power of federal government is indicated in the Constitution when such pandemics are there. The federal government can take different measures because it can implement standards, can establish standards. Whereas the regional states can utilize this standard and as a criteria and use it as a frame and frame their own policies. The issues related to public health are concurrent powers for the federal and the regional governments. So the federal government has.
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The federal government has policy making and legislative powers on pandemics as a public health issue. The federal government is also responsible for regulating the mobility of people in the country's borders to control the expansion of the pandemic. Because the problem is nationwide, the border is controlled by the federal government. So this federal government is expected to play active role by managing the country's borders. The federal government declared a national state of emergency on April 2020. The Oromiya Regional State also imposed restriction measures on public transportation on March 30, only by the executive political decision. But limiting the rights and freedoms of persons is not possible without following constitutional authority. Okay? So it was very confusing when many regional states, including Oromia, Amhara, and South regions, declared this restriction without following constitutional principles. Of course, the Tigray regional state declared a state of emergency. That was constitutional. All other regions can do that. But the problem was the federal government declared the state of emergency after the Tigray regional state declared a state of emergency, and there was overlapping. And there was a dispute between some scholars, some law scholars. They say that which one should prevail when two states of emergencies are declared at a time. Some say that the pandemic is nationwide, so the federal one prevails over the state. When others say that when we look at the federal system and the federal laws, regional states are autonomous. They can declare a state of emergency within their jurisdiction. So how can the federal state of emergency overrules that one? That is a dispute and open for discussion and still for interpretation. But local governments are doing many things since this pandemic started in our country. Because they are closer to the people, they are doing many things, and what they are doing is not constitutionally given to them, rather it is simply implementing the policies formulated at the federal and at the regional level, because they are not granted policy-making powers by the constitutions. And the regional states may take back, because if their power is not guaranteed by constitution, regional states may take back the power they granted them when they think that it is necessary. Because of this, there may be political manipulation as well. So during the pandemic, a state of command post was established, ministerial committee. Everything was managed by that ministerial committee, a kind of command post. Command post is a popular word in our country nowadays. There are many command posts in many places, but this one is a health-related command post. Others may be the security issue anyway. So the command post was managing. So the power of local governments is also limited because of this command post. They were not doing even during peacetime. They don't have power. So during state of emergency, they cannot have any power. So local governments in Ethiopia rely on senior level of governments for many of the pandemic-related issues rather than deciding for themselves. The federal government has broad policy-making power and can impact local government actions. So the regional governments also regulate local governments through their regional policies and plans. So both senior levels of government play key roles in local government actions during this time of coronavirus pandemic through the established task forces at the federal, and the role of local governments is limited only to implementation.
Your time is over, and then take 1 minute and summarize.
This affects local government's role as laboratories of innovative ideas. In a well-functioning federal system, subnational levels and local governments are considered as laboratories of democracy and policy innovation, but that is not working in our country. Recommendations: there is a need to constitutionally establish local governments and put specific competencies for them. The regional constitution should be revised and explicitly state policy-making powers of local governments. There is a need to build the capacity of local governments. We should not always try to solve the problem from the center. In the long term, we don't know what will come in the future after 5 years, after 10 years. Similar pandemics may happen, so we should not rely on central government always. We have to be strategic and empower our local governments. Awareness creation for regional states about their constitutional rights is very important because they are not exercising their mandates. They are given to, for example, they are given to declare a state of emergency during this kind of pandemic, but they are waiting the federal government to give them direction. So that kind of issues are problems. And thank you very much.
I thank you, Dr. Nuguse, who is an assistant professor working for College of Governance and Leadership in Ethiopian Civil Service University. He has brought to our attention that the role of local government, of course, many of the discussion was about we have 3 tiers of government here in Ethiopia. One is local at district level, and the other one is regional, and then comes on the top the federal government. The interstate relationship has been just discussed by Mr. Nuguse. Of course, much of the discussion dwells over the power relationship and also the constitutionality of the local government, with particular reference to the controlling and prevention of the pandemic. Of course, this is one pandemic. God forbid, what if another pandemic is to rise? So the cavity is being shown by this researcher. This time on, so we will discuss. I hope you have your notes, and then your memory is also as fresh as possible regarding the previous presenters. I now call upon Mr. Daniel Tassama and Mr. Solomon Tasfai to join us here and hear their verdict from the audience. You are welcome, please. Mr. Solomon, come on, and Mr. Daniel, come on, and then this would be the time for discussion and reflection and thought sharing. whenever you address your question, please mention the name of the presenter so that he can, of course, unluckily we don't have the she presenter, he can take the note of his part. So I think the researchers are here and the audience is again here. So you are welcome. I would give the chance for the first, the principal who comes first will be served first. The first 5 hands will be entertained for the first round, and then we will proceed as the time allows us to do so. Please. Oh, Dr. Zariun is there. The lawyer is probably having many questions about the intergovernmental interstate relationships in Ethiopia. Thank you. You are number 1. Yes, sir. My honored guest from KOICA is number 2. Then, ladies, please. We are looking forward to hear from you too. Should I call you by name? Yes, my dear. I'm sorry, forgive me for not mentioning your name.
My name is Sagai from KOICA.
KOICA, yes. Mr. Sagai from KOICA is number 3. Any other one? So let's proceed with this first volunteer people to share their ideas, provide us the comments, and also share us the reflections they had on 3 of the papers that have been presented so far. So let me go to Dr. Zariun.
Thank you very much. I'd like to also thank the Ethiopian Civil Service University and KOICA for organizing such a wonderful and timely workshop. Having said that, my first question goes to Mr. Daniel, and you were mentioning of the problem related with this gender-based violence, and as a lawyer, I was expecting you to just say something about the role of justice sector, because that is there to actually halt such criminal activities, I would say. So what do you think the role of justice sector, and of course other, could be religious or otherwise institutions, in halting the ongoing gender-based violence against women and girls in this era of COVID pandemic? My second question goes to my friend, Professor Nguse. I think it's a really wonderful topic, and because as far as my knowledge goes, this is an under-researched topic, local government, and it's also my interest area. You were several times talking about the need to recognize local government in the federal constitution. Why such a recommendation, given the fact that they have already got constitutional recognition in those regional states' constitution? Why? That is my concern, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zariun, and I'm sorry for not mentioning your name, sir.
This is Abraham.
Abraham, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome, Mr. Abraham.
Okay, thank you very much, first of all, for arranging this seminar, especially for KOICA and the ECSU. Due to this critical issue, though we are a little bit late, hopefully we will have a good times to come. I have 2 questions. My first question goes to Mr. Daniel, to the first presenter, regarding this sexual and gender-based violence. I am wondering whether this issue is new or do you mean that it has become worse in the COVID-19 period? Because as far as my understanding, this human rights violation against women and girls is it has been in our country and in the world for so long time. Maybe the intensity and the impact may be different at different times. Do you have any comparison? Do you mean that it has now become worse than before? I don't see any new agenda, whether in the context of COVID. Since it was before COVID, we have such kind of issues, and during COVID, we have also the same issue. So it has been better if you present it, or if you have any comparison to show us whether the impact has become worse during the COVID-19. If you get my question for my first presenter, Mr. Daniel. My second question goes to Mr. Solomon. This is a very interesting agenda. Since I am an engineer, I am from Ethiopian Roads Authority. This tracking and tracing of the GIS is very interesting. But I would like to ask, I am not clear about the buffer zone. You mentioned the buffer zone regarding where people are not allowed. That is a suggestion, I think, for no movement area. What is the purpose of that buffer zone? Do you think we can limit the movement of daily people? Do you mean this movement regarding including transportation movements? I am very satisfied that it is very helpful to locate the nearest health centers to response of emergency cases regarding the COVID-19. That's a good idea. But what is the purpose of buffer zone? Yes, there was a state of emergency when declared by the government, so that during the first times, if you remember, everybody was recommended to stay at home, but that was now, at this time, it's no more applicable. So what do you mean by when you say buffer zone and no movement recommendation? So your study is already localized in Addis. What about in the bigger scale, in the countrywide? Maybe it can be extended so that we know that some cities are congested and more vulnerable to COVID-19, like Addis and Nazareth and so on. So we can also extend your study to national-wide and apply your findings. Thank you very much.
Okay. First of all, it's a great honor to be here and raise my opinion and the question. I would like to thank the Ethiopian Civil Service University for hosting this kind of meaningful conference. My name is Again, I'm from KOICA Ethiopia office. I'm a coordinator of this conference, and I've got two questions. The first question goes to Mr. Solomon, who presented a very interesting topic. My question is, your research can be summarized as DHIS versus GIS in case of tracking COVID-19. So you have mentioned some strength point of GIS in order to track COVID-19 related spatial data, and I didn't see any kinds of challenge or problem that the government has faced. Maybe that the Ethiopian Ministry of Health or any kinds of health-related organization has faced while using DHIS, since it is a famous instrument that the global countries are using. To mention some, Singapore and some Scandinavian countries are very successful in using this GHIS too, most probably. And is there any kinds of assessment that you have got, any kinds of best practice that you have got that the world country use this kinds of data gathering software, and is there any kinds of best practice that the Ethiopian government can share? That's my number one question. And another question that I have goes to Assistant Professor Nuguse. You have mentioned the clear hierarchical structure of the Ethiopian government, which is very interesting. And you have mentioned some challenge that especially policy challenge under your recommendation. I have been listening to your recommendation, and I have just one very simple concern. That is, you have given a power to the regional government until formulating a policy, if I'm not mistaken. So you have been mentioning that it will be very supportive if the federal government provide a power to formulate a policy, especially in relation with the COVID-19. So I wonder maybe if these kinds of ultimate power concerning a policy formulation is given to the regional power, don't you have a threat that there might be a problem in policy planning steps? There are so many kinds of policy planning steps. For example, the problem structuring is one of policy planning process that the policy maker should go through. So don't you think there might be a problem of having a consistent policy, maybe problem structuring or maybe policy implementation? That's my second question. Thank you very much.
Any other person who is interested to add on the discussion? Yes, madam. Okay. Ms. Samla is there. Let's listen to her. And probably one more. Yes, Dr. Bello is again here. Welcome. So you are number 4 and number 5.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank you for those who are organizer and presenter. My question goes to the third presenter, Assistant Professor Noguse. I have been listening at the Constitute stated that at the federal government establish and implement the standard policies and how look like the acceptance of the local government and how they implement these standards by the regional government. And do you have any suggestion that uses to minimize the overlapping of federal and local government power? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sotle, and Dr. Bello continues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to thank you, Ethiopian Civil Service University and KOICA for organizing such a kind of conference. And also I want to thank these presenters, very nice presentation. I want to raise some comments or questions to the second presenter, Ato Solomon. It may be raised, but my issue is with hotspots of corona. First it should be indicated by naming in which area it is more dominant, ranked. Number 2, should hotspot indicated with uniform buffer zone. Simply circle should be a buffer zone. Maybe it should be measured in terms of distance of the dominance or density, as I will. So, uniformity of this buffer zone circle is not clear to me. If there is best practice on that, it may be nice. The second one is how you, as the last you had shown the trend of corona at the sub-city, Addis Ababa. Per sub-city, I think Yekka is more dominant colored with heavy color. I see it. Per what? What is the denominator for that? Is it per capita or per population or per what? Maybe I may not be clear if there is a key for that density of trend of that diagram. Showing with diagram from the previous to up to now is very nice, but per what you indicated that density. You indicated in terms of buffer zone as well as in terms of density or per capita, I think. But perhaps you shown this distribution should be very important as well. Maybe thirdly, it may be raised, how is GIS implementation for corona best practice? It may be very important to share experience of GIS implementation for corona distribution, maybe per urban, since we are one primate city. Well, other primate cities in Africa, maybe that how they see this tool to indicate the distribution of the corona may be very meaningful to see the planning issues or generate many issues for the future. It may be very important tool in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me come back to the researchers. We have several questions. Dr. Zarikun also directed his first question to Daniel. The role of justice system in tackling gender-based violence has not been mentioned in any way. It suits to the case. And the other question by same person is to Atolebuse. Since local governments are recognized by regional states, so why do we need to call for recognition by the federal states? The local government is really answerable in some extent with some relationship to the regional states. The other two questions to Mr. Daniel and Mr. Solomon are from Mr. Abraham. I see no new thing about or regarding gender-based violence with particular reference to corona, since this is persistent problem of the global community and its challenge also heightens when we go down to the level of development, economic development especially. So what new particular issue is pertaining to or referring to the corona spread is one of the questions to the respective, I think, presenter, Mr. Daniel. And again, Mr. Abraham has a question about what is the purpose of establishing buffer zone and no movement area with regard to handling, containing the spread of COVID-19. The other person is Mr. Tagai from KOICA. He has said that, is particularly referring to the presentation by Mr. Solomon, GHIS versus GIS. What challenges characterize the GIS, which is globally being under use, and then why should we resort to GIS, leaving the GHIS? Can you show us the merit and demerits of these things? Is one of the questions. Same person also mentioned posed another question to Mr. Lucy. Policy formulation role controversy. If handed down to the local government, then where would be the knob of control to maintain at least standard policy across the nation? So how can you challenge this kind of recommendation, or how can you convince us about this kind of recommendation is, I think, concerned by Mr. Takai. The other question is by Mrs. Savile. The suggestion of power sharing in Ethiopia, okay, the same question or related question to that of Atazakais. And Dr. Velo mentioned, what good practice do you have regarding buffer zone establishment? That is also similar to the point being raised by Mr. Abraham. And trend of density against what? What parameter do you have to show us the density? What indicators can signify the density or that concentration you mentioned in your presentation? And the last one by Dr. Bello is how GIS can be helpful in combating corona pandemic. These are the questions respective, and I think in their order of presentation, respective presenters would give you the response, and responses also are expected from the audience too, not only from presenters. Thank you.
I really understand the very concern of Dr. Zarifun as a lawyer. He raised the issue of justice system and the role of justice sector in the fight against sexual and gender-based violence. It's a true concern. When I was presenting, for the sake of time, I was unable to finish reading all the recommendations. I have clearly listed some of the recommendations which are directly linked with that of the justice system. First and foremost, government should strengthen its justice system so that the perpetrators can be legally punished for the human rights abuses they engage in. The second recommendation that I have regarding the justice system, because my topic is about human rights vis-à-vis SGBV, I cannot put aside the issue of justice system. My second recommendation is that increasing police awareness on SGBV through training helps them better understand how to respond to violence incidents and protect violence survivors. Last one is strengthening the provision of free legal aid services to violence victims helps to ensure that the justice system empowers them to report any form of abuse with confidence. As an example, I have mentioned in my PPT the support of everyone, Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association. They have been assisting violence victims and encouraging them to report any kind of violence cases. I was mentioning in my presentation that particularly after the release of a report that more than 100 people have been raped and sexually assaulted, different organs, and this rape cases, these sexual assault cases have caused public outrage and public grievances on social media plus mainstream media outlets. They have created public outcry. Different national and international organizations jumped in to curb this problem. From my readings, I came to know that even the Ethiopian Chief Justice, Her Excellency Martha Shenafi, made a statement on how to minimize the problem of sexual and gender-based violence. And she said federal courts have been mandated to listen to and entertain charges of domestic violence as urgent types of cases, even during when this country declared a state of emergency for about 5 months. And the second question came from Engineer Abraham. Do you mean that sexual and gender-based violence a new phenomenon? I didn't say that sexual and gender-based violence in Ethiopia is a new phenomenon. I am claiming that the outbreak and spread of COVID-19 throughout the nation has exacerbated the problem. I was mentioning in my presentation that 100 plus violence cases have been reported within a couple of months since the first coronavirus case reported in the country. So the idea is that, in fact, we are unable to know the exact magnitude of violence because violence cases are underreported in Ethiopia, and women and girls who experience different forms of violence do not have the courage and commitment to go to police or of courts to report those violence cases. But outbreak of this disease has exacerbated the problem since countries, including Ethiopia, have decided this closure measures to contain the disease, and women and girls were forced to stay at home with their perpetrators. This is my main claim. So I do say that this is a new phenomenon. We know that our sisters have been facing violence for years, but this disease has brought about adverse impacts on violence and violation of their human rights. That's it.
The very old problem, taking a new face, a new bringing us a new challenge that it means. Thank you very much. And then Mr. Solomon continues.
Thank you, Dr. Anamayo. And I will start the question raised by Mr. Abba. What is the purpose of the buffer zone? You know, the first thing what I did is that I produced the so-called document based on a given statistical data of a month. Okay, based for example, June. Then I ran it. Then I found that using the current density estimation, the hotspot area, based on that, buffer was created. By the way, all the circles, the colors, everything indicated on the map, they have their own interpretation. If you look on the map, there is a legend on the bottom. Okay? Therefore, the intention of this study is that, you know, one way of countering the disease is through making a kind of buffer. It could be for 1 or 2 days, there is no movement, etc. But it should be done in very small area. Let's say, for example, the example I have put it here, it was a buffer zone for 1,000 meters, 2,000 and 3,000 meters. That means 1 kilometer around the hotspot area. So that there should, this is one way of counteracting the disease. So that's the importance of buffer zone. Maybe I just suggest this could help in counteracting the disease. It could also lower, okay? Unless otherwise it will be fastly distributed to the other surrounding area also. The other thing that you have mentioned, Mr. Ab, also I just asked that we should extend this one also to the other cities, or it could also be a national-wise study. This one also I support it. The second question by Mr. Turkey, comparing DHIS and GIS. I'm not saying that DHIS is not important. Let me put the difference. DHIS, District Health Information System, it is very important for the health sector. Even it's being practiced nowadays in more than 60 countries. Okay? They are all happy using the so-called DHIS. But what I'm saying is that beside this software, also GIS can be applicable. Let me show you the difference. If you see GIS, it has two things. One is the spatial data, the other one is non-spatial data. By the way, everybody should know that GIS is unique from many different softwares. If you take SPSS, it is only one. Database. TOC, DHIS, database. Excel, only database. What about the rest? GIS has that spatial and non-spatial. That means There is the GEO database, and at the same time there is also the map. Let's say YECA subsidy. If you took YECA subsidy, full information about YECA subsidy can be handled on the GEO database. This is the difference. Therefore, it can manipulate both spatial and non-spatial data GIS. So it's different from the other softwares. So it's better to use. That means that it's better also we should use beside DHIS also GIS. DHIS is for other different purpose, but GIS can also help us for producing different maps. They are, now, if you look, they are producing term-based data, okay? But beside that, like they are, it's been practiced also in many different countries nowadays. So beside that, term at the same map, at the same time, if they include also, a kind of map, it would be better. This is the intention of the study. The other one, by the question raised by Dr. Bello, with regard to the color, the circle, everything, they have their own interpretation, okay? They are not simple circles. Let's say, for example, the colors. We call them graduate color. If you look at them, each and every color, if you go at the legend, indicates the number of cases. So the lighter color means lower case. It could be 1,000. Then it goes like that. That means we call that such kind of color graduate color. As it goes darker, the number of cases is increasing. It's not only such kind of map. There are many on the document. There are also dot maps, dot density map, which indicates a single dot. It could be 100 number of cases. So you can produce such kind of maps also. The other one with regard to the circles also, on the legend part, each and every color at the circle, they have their own buffer. That means the blue, the red, for example, is 2,000 meters. Okay, buffer from the center of the point throughout the skull, the radius 2,000 meters. That means 2 kilometers around the area. The practice of GIS, but it's been practiced by the way in many different countries nowadays, but not yet in Ethiopia. So that's why I try to mention. And the importance of this study, as you see, you can produce the so-called nearest neighborhood analysis. The other one is kernel density, but beyond that, best route and closest facility at the base. Let me give you an example. Here, suddenly, anybody could be infected with coronavirus and suddenly could fail. So where are you going to take it? From this point, he is in danger of death, yeah? So where do you go? Where do you take it? Do you know the health centers and hospitals around it? Therefore, if you run this software, if you run with the help of this software can identify easily one, the nearest, it could be health hospital or health center. The other importance in that, beyond that, it could also show which route are you going to use. Okay? So this is the importance of the software. It could help a lot by you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ngase, continue.
Okay, thank you for.
Will you please put it off, that one?
Okay.
That mic. Put it off.
Okay, very important questions are raised. I would like to thank all of you. The first question is why recognition of local governments is important at federal constitution, I think. Why recognition? When the local governments can get power from the regional states, why is it important to recognize them at the federal level? So the contemporary governance theory is of the view that we have to push power away from the center to the periphery. Why? Because the community is there, they have to have a power. What kind of power? Political power, administrative power, and fiscal power as well. When they have power, when power is devolved to the local level, the local community can easily participate, and there will also be innovation, and accountability will be also becomes good. Because of this, if the federal government leaves the power for the regional states, that is not original power, so they may retake the power whenever they need it is necessary. But if it is stated in the constitution, the federal constitution, it is very difficult to take power. It may take a long time, it is very rigid, it is not easy. That is one thing. The other one is, in a well-functioning federal system, the local governments, if they are empowered, they can innovate, they can bring new things. If they have power, if they have autonomy, if they are independent, they can innovate policies. And those policies can be transferred to other states or to other local governments. So locally innovated policies can easily, with low costs, with less effort, can easily transfer to other parties. If they don't have power, they are limited only to the implementing institutions. They always expect, especially when such kind of pandemics happen, innovation. We can't expect without giving them power to innovate. So one of the important arguments is that if we empower them, they innovate new policies. Depending on the context, different contexts, they may come up with different solutions for the problem, out of which the best can be selected and implemented somewhere with less cost. This is one important. The other one is people may easily participate. So, if the regional states do not give them power, if the regional constitutions recognize them, the regional constitution is below the federal constitution. In one country, it is the federal constitution which gives original power for different authorities. So that is one justification. In addition to that, the federal government gave power for the states to establish local governments, and the local governments, the regional governments are expected to give them adequate power according to the federal constitution. Adequate power, and people should also participate. That can enable the participation of the people. But this is not clear because there is no standard. Some regional states interpret this in different way. And for example, some policy documents say that in one warada, at least there must be 100,000 population. But in practice, we find that there are many waradas who has less than 100,000 people. So because of this, it becomes haphazard, and it varies from local governments to local governments. Because of this, it has to be recognized at federal constitution level. The other issue is how can overlapping of power, policy power, political power, executive power, overlapping of power be managed? I think that is the issue. And we have to understand our federal system. Our federal system is dual federal system. In dual federal system, the different levels of government have the similar authorities on some issue, on their jurisdiction. That means, for example, there is a council at the federal level and at the regional levels. Those councils have their own power, but the power given for the federal government is nationwide, whereas the power given for the regional state is region-wide. Why is the fear for overlapping? Why? Because there will be a conflict. Conflict in federations or in federal system is inevitable, and it is considered as the necessary evil and the beauty of federalism. Conflict is inevitable. There will be a conflict always. But the problem is how we manage that conflict. To implement a well-functioning federal system, there are prerequisites like democracy, having institutions, strong rule of law, and culture of negotiation. This can solve the problem. Otherwise, whatever federal system you install, there will be a conflict always, unless you have a democratic system. So the solution is to build democracy, to have a strong institution. Whenever there is a conflict, they have to negotiate. Negotiation is a very important issue in the federal system. They have to negotiate. And when there is a disagreement, they have to go to the third party or the umpire, the institution. If we don't have a strong institution, that cannot be solved. So overlapping is inevitable in dual federal system. Policy, for example, in Germany, for example, in German federal system, it is not dual federalism, rather the policy is formulated at the federal level and implemented at the regional level, at the canton, at the land level. Ours is different. Our federal system is dual federalism, where different institutions are duplicated in different levels. The solution is to know the federal system and fulfilling the prerequisites for managing the federal system. I think what is left, overlapping issues answered, and both questions are more or less similar. I think I reacted to both.
You're done. Thank you. Well, I have to be humble at about the end of my term. Now I will never be your probably, I don't know, facilitator. So I'd like to thank you both, the presenters, and with much more emphasis to the participants of this conference. But still, before handing down my power, I am looking for the pleasure of having one or more questions from especially ladies. I don't mean that gents are just excluded. If you have, you are most welcome. Because we, as per the schedule, we have a few minutes for discussion, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Gavin Kelmesha. I'm from Addis Ababa University. My question goes to Mr. Solomon, and I have some concerns related to the topic. The reason is that I'm so interested in the technology, but I have some concerns. The very first one is data concerns. How can we make sure that the data are available and they are accurate? Because this is very important. Without data, we can't do anything. The data could be related to the demographic data on the movement of people. How can we get this data? Because we don't have such system that can gather the real-time information and data and then provide the system with this kind of accurate information. So this is my big concern related to the technology. The second one is the technological issue, the technology itself. How can we protect this data? Once we collect the data, how can we make it ensure that the data is protected and could be used in a proper way? So do we have this kind of policy to protect this kind of information? And finally, I would have the methodological issue. How can we make it real? How can we, what kind of strategies should be in place to make sure that we can implement this kind of technology in a proper way? Thank you very much.
Welcome to Dr. Zarihun once again and then Cyril.
Thank you very much once again. I just would like to say something on the point raised by my colleague Nguse on issues of conflict of laws. Just he mentioned of the experience of the state of Tigray, in which the state enacted state of emergency law, and then after the federal government enacted state of emergency law in order to fight COVID-19. I think this is related to private international law. We can still use principles developed under this private international law, in which we may even domesticate private international law whenever there is conflict of laws between the federal government and the constituent units. So as far as state of emergency law is concerned, this is a shared power between the federal government and the state governments as per Article 93 of the Constitution. So if one of the level of government, predates in enacting such a law, I think the law counts, the law which enacted first should be respected. In this sense, the law enacted by the state of Tigray, as far as fighting COVID-19 is concerned, must be respected and, of course, prevail over the federal law. That is a choice of law. So, given its shared power, so I think we have to respect the state, the Tigray state of emergency law. That's the solution. Thank you.
Thank you once again. I think all of the last questions are coming towards Mr. Solomon. The one is that the GIS system is there, but what mystery is providing information to the public. So what are you going to say about this practice? Otherwise, where there is no information sharing, there is nothing worthwhile to store information or to have a database alone. So you have to tell us the way as to how that information could be communicated through the citizenry. And the other three questions, I think very technical and important, from Mr. Gabra Mikhail of Addis Ababa University. How can you make sure that data collected via GIS can be accurate? The check of accuracy, authenticity of the data being collected through this means is another question. And how can you protect data? Not only accuracy, you can ensure the accuracy of data being collected through this means, but how can you protect the data? Is the second question. And the last one is, what strategy do you tell us, advise us to popularize the use of GIS in collecting information regarding the pandemic? I think I'm right. Correct me if mistakenly stated here. Oh, thank you very much. I think let me give the chance once again to Mr. Solomon. Welcome.
Okay, thank you again, Dr. Mayo. I think more of the comments, I also share the comments. I have seen also the experience of COVID. It's been highly implemented. Even, they register if anybody been infected by the virus, they register the XY coordinate of the infected person. This might be in the case of Ethiopia, not yet. And it will take time. But the intention of this study is, if we implement this software, it can help us in many different ways. The other comments, I totally accept them, I share also. With regard to the end result of such research is sharing of data. It will directly connect to the website. There is a means and method. It's very easy. That one is easy. The problem is data collection, okay? Let's say, for example, components of GIS are people, the expert, method, software, hardware, and data. To your surprise, the most expensive one is acquisition of data, especially spatial data. Let's say both the raw network, as an example that I have used, I just collected them either from EcoGIS or from OCHA. Okay? Even OCHA, they have the health facilities which are found in Addis Ababa. They collect almost all. I just collect very few because it is very difficult to acquire or to the acquisition of spatial data. So it needs a lot of work, not yet. Okay. The other, with regard to the question raised by Mr. Dr. Mikhail from Addis Ababa University, with regard to the policy, any health-related data in order to get from Ministry, it could be from Ministry of Health or EPHI, there is a policy and a guideline. Okay? Let's say, for example, as an example, I try to get data from EPHI, so I go through a lot of process. It's not simple. Okay? I have signed a lot of things. I have to show them the agreement I have made with Ethiopia Civil Service University. Okay, I have submitted the copy, and I have to sign some kind of agreement not to abuse data. So there is, a guideline in policy. So it's not easily shared. So in order to protect data, there is a policy. But the other important thing, everybody should be aware that in the case of Ethiopia, related to spatial data, not yet. Okay? We are not yet. So it needs a lot of work and a lot of, we just collect and data. The other one with regard to accuracy of data, there are different kind of data source. Aerial photograph, survey, handheld GPS, differential GPS. The most accurate data was differential GPS. But for such kind of study, handheld GPS is more than enough. No problem about the accuracy. We shouldn't worry about that, unless otherwise we should use, especially for the hospitals and health centers, the so-called differential GPS, which is more accurate in order to collect data. So related to accuracy, there is always a problem. There is always error in spatial data. We cannot correct that. The only thing is that we should minimize the error. Let's say, for example, in the case of land, related to ownership, etc., more accurate data is needed. In the case of urban planning, let's say, for example, we can use satellite image, okay? So it depends according to the organization's use. So thank you very much.
I am left with nothing but two things. The third will come. Two things. Let's appreciate our presenters, honor our presenters by joining hands. Thank you. You are now officially relieved of your tasks. And then let's also praise the people, peace, prosperity, and the planet. Let's join hands. This is the motto of KOICA. And Madam Martin was my boss. Now I am officially being dismissed. This is a time for lunch. Can we break for lunch now? Thank you very much. Bon appetit. Thank you.